Welcome. In this review, I'd like to go over the Nikon Z F and why I think it's actually become one of the best, if not one of the best cameras that you could actually buy in 2024. Let's get started. So, long story short, I think this camera is phenomenal. It's a 9 out of 10. There's definitely some quirks and certain things I don't like about it, but there's a lot to love about this camera. Nikon initially announced this camera in a time when no one expected. No one expected this camera to come out. No one expected a full frame retro style camera emulating their amazing FM2. But I'm really glad that they announced it. And when they did, I pre-ordered it, thinking, okay, this will be an interesting retro style camera. Boy, was I really surprised with a lot of the capabilities of this camera. Let's kind of go over some of my likes and dislikes about this camera. First of all, the retro style of this camera is amazing. I love the tactile feel and the look of this camera. It reminds me of the classic 35mm SLR cameras. And I don't know, the dials are very tactile and they sound really good. They feel good in the hands. The camera itself feels great in the hands. And one thing I really love is actually pairing this particular camera actually with old vintage lenses. So I got the Helios 44-2 on here, and we'll talk a little bit more about vintage lenses in this, but I love how they look on this camera. Like it's amazing. If I slap on the 28 f2, it also looks a lot like a retro body still, which I love. This is a great camera to really add on retro lenses. Another thing I really like about this camera is that when I take it out to shoot, people are complimenting it all the time. I don't know what it is, but people really seem to spot this camera out from a dozen modern mirrorless cameras. Again, it's probably because of the retro style. Apart from the retro style, so one thing that I did not expect Nikon to actually do is this little switch right here. So you could go between regular photo and video modes with the flip of the switch. But what's super interesting about this camera is it has a dedicated black and white mode from the Nikon kind of monochrome default color. I don't know what it is about that switch that really made me want to play more with black and white. And most of my shots, as you can see here, are in black and white. And most of these are just straight out of camera with little corrections. But what I love about Nikon and what they're really pushing lately is actually their NX Studio. You could actually load presets or styles, as they're calling it, or presets and styles into this camera, and you could actually save them and actually have something to play around with. So when you're actually looking for, let's say, a default monochrome style or a default preset to actually get a feel for the color that you're actually going to be baking into the images before you take them, it's something really great and really wonderful to have, because thinking and shooting in black and white is very different than shooting in color. And so I really appreciate that. Another thing I really love about this camera, besides having great video spec or phenomenal color science from Nikon's, amazing color and super simple to grade files, is I love that it has video features from the Nikon Z8 and Z9. So this particular camera does have the modern X-Speed 7 processor that's in the Nikon Z8 and 9. Honest, without this processor, a lot of their cameras cannot keep up from, let's say, the older Nikon Z6 Mark 1 and 2 to the Z7 Mark 1 and 2. Those processors couldn't handle good autofocus. And now we have modern deep learning algorithms to actually increase the hit rate, if you will, of the autofocusing system. So when you actually pair this with modern Nikkor lenses, modern Z lenses, the autofocus, as you can see in some of these videos, is amazing. So to really put this camera to its paces for my long-term 6-month review, I thought, why not take this on a long-term trip? And so I actually went to Highway 1 all the way from Southern California all the way to north to Big Sur. And I put this camera through its paces from video to photo, and everything in between. And honestly, the photos I have gotten with almost no grading are amazing. The video is amazing. The autofocusing from a lot of the birds, the animals, to the landscaping is phenomenal. Even with just putting this thing through hell on the coast and going through basically a storm, it held up very well. Not only that, the fact that I love the autofocus with this, it does miss a couple times. I will grant you that. The autofocusing system is not perfect, but it does better than what Nikon used to have for these smaller camera bodies. The Z8 and Z9 technology has basically trickled down to the Z F, which I am really happy. Another thing I love about this is the fact that they built a lot of video features into this camera. I am not sure what Nikon entailed or wanted to do with this camera. I think they wanted really to have an everyday camera that anyone could use, either for content creation, you know, photos, videos, anything from professionals to content creators to even, you know, the person who's going to be capturing family photos, you know. I think they built this camera with that detail in mind. It's amazing. When I actually want to do video with this thing, a lot of the features that were in the Z9 and Z8 trickle down, and it actually makes it even easier and better because you now have this little articulating flip screen to actually record video. I know to a lot of Canon, other camera companies have been doing this, but for Nikon to do this and actually give it to people with a great autofocusing, great N-Log, which is kind of Nikon's log version, as well as other sort of little, I don't want to call it, quality improvements of life compared to their older video features, is amazing. So you could actually get you don't get a vector scope, which is one of the downsides, but you get a really good display on here with basically anything you could really want to shoot with. The only thing I definitely regret is that they didn't put video scopes or waveforms in here, but you know, they have a, you know, little display that you see when you're actually taking photos. You could actually see when you're blowing out your highlights. False color would have been nice, but being able to shoot with this at 4K 60 with a crop though is really wonderful, because I could get a lot of slow-mo shots like these with a handheld camera with VR built in and not have to worry about a tripod. And that is phenomenal. That is amazing. Another thing I really love about this, besides it's just such a fun video camera to hold and use. As compared to a lot of the other older Nikon bodies, such as the Z6 or Z7, the Nikon Z8 and 9 have this interesting three tilt axis screen, but having this flip screen to use makes it super easy to take self-portraits and record yourself when you're doing video, or even just tilting it at different angles to get really good shots. I love that. Been surprised at actually using is the Nikon, the pixel shift is what they call it, which is essentially Nikon's high resolution mode for their video cameras. And essentially when you actually use pixel shift, the sensor is moving around and creating this 96 megapixel photo. 96 megapixels. That is phenomenal. 96 is almost 100 megapixel, which is basically almost a medium format image on its own. Now, I'm not saying that it's high quality or great quality, but 96 gives you enough possibility to zoom in when you don't have a telephoto lens and create this amazing high resolution image. It's wonderful to have that included. So this is the interesting thing that I think Nikon created this camera for. They created this camera to test the waters on a similar body and style that they're going to be pushing for the Z6 Mark III. Don't hold me to that, but I think this camera is really meant for the everyday creator, right? The person who just wants to pick up a stylish camera, really love how it feels, and be able to create videos and photos on the spot. That is a wonderful idea. Because I have a couple old manual focus lenses from the SLR days that I actually use on this camera. So the two lenses that mostly live on this camera is the 28-2, back from the, I guess you could say, the SLR days, And this particular lens actually used to live on my old FME2 that I used to have. The other one that lives on this is actually the Helios 40-42. And these two combination of lenses, a 28 and a 58 or so, create amazing photos and video. So I love being able to pair this. I'm probably going to get a couple more retro lenses from the film days, and I do love that Nikon created this particular body for the everyday creator in mind. And which kind of brings me to the point that who is this camera for? You know, it's anyone who wants to get into the Nikon ecosystem that was kind of on the fence. You know, they have a lot of, let's say, F glass or SLR glass, and they wanted something stylish, right? They love the classic 35 millimeter or they like the SLR style bodies, right? Like the Fujis, but they kind of have Nikon glass sitting around, right? So this is a great stylish camera to get you started, but you're getting so much camera for the price. Now, if you actually look at a lot of cameras in this price range, Nikon is competitively pushing this camera to be $1,996 or so, basically $2,000 US. What other cameras can you think that have all these features, this stylish design that keeps up from autofocus to video to photo, and even having a dedicated black and white mode? The only ones I could think of is a couple Fujis. And yes, there are some trade-offs, but man, the design is just so nice. And if you're already invested in the Nikon ecosystem, this is a no-brainer. This is the camera for you right now, I would say. And in 2024, this is basically one of the... With that being said, there are a couple drawbacks, right? Nikon created the design with really cool brass little details and metal construction everywhere, or aluminum. One of the downsides with this design is unfortunately this right here. It's the bad grip situation you got going on right here. So without this small rig grip, this thing is gonna hurt to carry around. So I wouldn't recommend even shooting this camera long term with photo or video in mind if you're not gonna get the grip. Within a few moments, my grip right here was hurting after a couple photos. And I don't know if it's because I gripped the camera too hard or it's just not comfortable. So I highly recommend, if you are gonna get this camera, get the grip at least. But that's one of the first gripes. The second gripe is that there's no little joystick. So if you know anything about the Nikon cameras, they always include a little joystick with the mirrorless cameras. And for some reason, they didn't include it here. I don't know why. It bugs me to hell because you have to use this little controller or Nintendo pad here to actually, let's say for example, move the navigation menu. And also you have to use it to actually align your autofocusing when you actually pick a square for your autofocusing. I hate it. I don't like it. Nikon, what? Just, you could have put a little joystick here. The other thing is that I don't like about this is actually with the video specs. So when you're shooting 4K, the limit that you could shoot the highest resolution, the highest frame rate is 60 frames per second with a crop. I don't like that. 60 frames per second is okay, but we're getting a crop. Come on, Nikon. You could have done a little bit better with that, especially with this processor that you put in there. The other thing I don't like is actually the autofocusing system here. And it's more of a nitpicky thing, but with Nikon, you could actually pick more autofocusing subjects, I suppose. So you could pick animals, birds, trains, planes, and automotive now as well. But with this guy, you could only choose 3. It's humans, animals, cars, and planes. No birds. See, this is where it bugs me, is that you could have put birds in here for this camera. I don't know. Hopefully you could address that with an update or a firmware update. I'm not going to be picky about that. But other than that, honestly, I can't find too many complaints about this camera. For the price, the things you're getting from a Nikon ecosystem, everything from a content creator sort of focused camera with a flip screen, the retro style design with modern features, the amazing autofocusing, great video specs, and really great photo and video with a dedicated black and white mode. I don't know too many cameras that have that but it's a satisfying camera to hold and use for the price. And if you're on the fence to get this camera, just get it. I highly recommend it. There's very few faults I could give this camera, and honestly, I love it. I am really happy I made this purchase. I think I might eventually get another one once this one gets more worn, and probably get one of the really cool exclusive colors that Nikon has. But other than that, the photos, the video, everything that I've put this camera through it's handled it all. Honestly, this sensor is something else, and I'm really happy I got this camera. All right, well, that's been my review. Leave your comments below. What are you on the fence about this camera? Or if you own this camera, what do you like the most about it? And until then, let me know in the comments. I hope you really enjoyed this video and this review. Till then, talk later.